And every single time I do it, I never regret it. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching Speaker Breakdown. This is actually part 2 of a 2-part series. So if you want to watch part 1 first, it's linked down below. Enjoy.
The transfer has been purposeful. While the cohorts, corporations, and the ultra-wealthy continue to garner more and more of our wealth, we have decided, I know, if they win the gold, let's give them the silver and the bronze, and let's lower their taxes. This transfer is purposeful. It's not by accident. And it works. Senior poverty is way down, and we should celebrate that. Meanwhile, child poverty is flat to up.
There, boom.
The third rail, I'm going to talk about Social Security. It would
another good comparison of numbers against other numbers. If you would have just talked about how senior standard of living is way up, nothing. But by comparing it to younger people, boom, now it has more impact.
It cost $11 billion to expand the child tax credit, but that gets stripped out of the infrastructure bill. But the additional $135 billion a year to Social Security, that flies right through Congress. And every year we transfer $1.4 trillion from a cohort that is increasingly doing less well to the cohort that is the wealthiest cohort in the history of this planet. I'm not against Social Security, but the criteria should be if you need it, not whether you have a catheter.
Another great talking point, another good little billboard. You see how he's constantly like anchoring what he's saying to these little summary points? And look at, I don't want to take away from the fact that part of the reason why this speech is so great is because there is a lot of personal emotion here. And we can't all have personal emotion. I get that. But why are we talking to groups of people unless there's a vested interest, either in me or for them? I mean, if I can benefit, fantastic. If they can benefit, fantastic. And so that means some emotional appeal.
80% of you have absolutely no reason to ever take Social Security. It is bankrupting our nation, and we have fallen under this mythology that somehow it's this great social program. No, it's not. It's the great transfer of wealth from young to old.
Another billboard. It's the great transfer of wealth from young to old. I love also that he said 80% of you. So he's pointing it back to the audience. It's another great strategy. As often as you can in a presentation, no matter how factual it is, throw it back to your audience. I mean, if it works for Scott Galloway, maybe it can work for us, right? Come on now.
How is this happening? Because our representatives are, in fact, representative. Old people vote. Washington has become a cross between the land of the dead and the Golden Girls. Quite frankly, this is fucking ridiculous. And if I sound ageist, I am. And you know who else is ageist? Biology. When Speaker Pelosi had her first child, get this, 2/3 of households didn't have color televisions, and Castro had just declared martial law. But she's supposed to understand the challenges of a 17-year-old girl who's 5'9", 95 pounds, getting tips on dieting and extreme dieting from Facebook. She's supposed to understand the challenges that a 27-year-old single mother face.
So notice, this is so powerful because he's giving you that anecdotal kind of archetype, right? Instead of saying young people or women, he's giving you a very specific person that we can imagine. And by doing that, it makes that information more impactful and it helps us to empathize. It actually creates an emotional response in us. Again, specifics and anecdotes are not evidence, but they are more impactful than evidence. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm saying that's the way this little bad boy works. Thought I told you that we won't stop.
By the way, young and dreamy. Young and dreamy.
A ridiculous, like, left turn out of nowhere. Now, one thing I will say is, pointing out Canada's prime minister is one thing, but the curveball, the unexpected twist, periodically breaking up the seriousness with just a random thing that is sort of connected, very powerful. In other words, making a joke for the sake of the joke, if you're getting too serious, is very powerful. And it's something that stand-up comics do, is when they're on, they'll go A, B, C, D, W, and then back, E, F, G, K. That's what he's doing here. Breaking it up and making it fun. Fun for the sake of fun, because he's talking about such a heavy subject matter, right?
The great intergenerational theft took place under the auspices of a virus. I know. Let's use the greatest health crisis in the century to really speedball the transfer. This is the NASDAQ from 2008 to 2012. We let the markets crash. And by the way, you need churn, you need disruption, because it seeds and recalibrates advantage and wealth from the incumbents to the entrants. It's a natural part of the cycle. But wait, lately, no, 1 million people dying would be bad, but what would be tragic is if we let the NASDAQ go down and guys like me lost wealth. So we pumped the economy, which again increased the massive transfer of wealth. The best 2 years of my life, COVID, more time with my kids, more time with Netflix, and my value of my stocks absolutely exploded. And who has to?
Another great example of taking something factual. We're looking at those charts, and if you're like me, you're like, lots of information. But then he says, people like me, when I was in my value of my stocks, he gave a personal anecdote, and that gave that information its meaning.
To pay for my prosperity? Not me. Future generations who will have to deal with an unprecedented level of debt. Why am I here and why do I get the prosperity I enjoy? Because in 2008, we bailed out the banks, but we didn't bail out the economy. We let the markets fall. So as I was coming into my prime income earning years, I got to buy, no joke, these stocks at these prices. This is where those stocks are now. Where does a young person find disruption? When you bail out the baby boomer owner of a restaurant, all you're doing is robbing opportunity from the 26-year-old graduate of a culinary academy that wants her shot. We need disruption.
So again, and I want to keep highlighting this because you see the secret to making charts and statistics stand out is making them personal. It's one thing to say that, average household income is $50,000. Great. See, you don't care. I don't care. Nobody cares. But if I follow that up and say average household income is $50,000, so my neighbor who's married and has 2 kids and his wife also works has to struggle because that $50,000 is gone after the first 6 months of the year. So what is he doing for the other 6 months? You see? That makes it real. That makes us care. Dare I say it makes us pensar? Now, here's an example of a very cool image. And it's saying it's cool not because of the subject matter, but because of what came before it, right? And what this does. Notice, before, this is the slide. And then that transitions into this without any context, which means we, as an audience, is thinking, how is this connected? It's Jeff Bezos, but what does it mean? So what is he doing? He's creating uncertainty and he's creating curiosity. So now we have to listen even more. And this is just like 2/3 through his speech. So what a great way to throw another curveball, something unexpected. And an easy thing that has nothing to do with your personalities, dear viewer, is just throw up a picture that seems disconnected and then connected to what you're talking about. See?
I just like this slide. It has no context or relevance.
Okay, so if you would have connected it, that would have been great. It was a funny joke, and then he actually did one of those A, B, C, D, W, and then back. But what if he would have done this? He says, I just like this slide. That's why I'm showing it. Everybody laughs. He says, but no, this is just another me. Jeff Bezos is another person who's just really benefit from the transfer of taxes. Does Jeff Bezos really need Social Security? Well, he gets it, or he can get it if he wants. that would have taken the humor, and then right after the humor, this fucking little thought bomb. Ikase smashes it.
We're economically attacking the young, but I know, let's attack their emotional and mental well-being. Let's take advantage of the fact of the flaws in our species with medieval institutions, Paleolithic instincts, and godlike technology. I'm just going to say, I think Mark Zuckerberg has done more damage to young people in our nation while making more money than any person in history. Oh, but wait, what could be worse? It's as if we let an adversary implant a neural jack into our youth to raise a generation of civic, military, and business leaders that hate America. How can we be this stupid?
Right? Information. Billboard.
All right, this all adds up to a bunch of graphs all headed up into the right. And what are they? What's the...
Boom. Okay, I love this part right here because, dear viewer, okay, what he's doing is information without context. So this gets us to a bunch of graphs that are all going up and to the right. But notice, we have no idea what they are. There's little hints, but watch. He makes each one of these graphs pop by first showing us the information without context, making us think about it, and then explaining what each one means.
First one? Oh, that's self-harm rates, which have exploded, especially among girls, since my colleague Jonathan Haidt pointed out it's really gone crazy since social went on mobile. What's the next one? Teens with depression. The next one, men and women not having sex. Biggest fear of my parents was that I was going to get in too much trouble. My biggest fear, honestly, is that my kids aren't going to get into enough trouble. By the way, my advice to every young person watching this program is go out, drink more, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off.
So that's just his personality, that dry, no-holds-barred humor, but that works for him. It won't work for all of us. However, it is compounded by the fact that he's doing something here. His little asides tell you about his personality, which make him sound real, which makes you trust him more. So periodically, give them your point of view. If you're doing a presentation and you're doing a lot of information, go, and by the way, I actually think blah, blah, blah. Give them that little curveball that's going to give you some personality, some opinion. Doesn't matter if they agree or disagree. You think he cares that they agree or disagree? It doesn't matter. But by giving his opinion, he's coming across as real. And that is something people trust, irrespective of agreement or disagreement. And if you do it, people will trust you more, even if they don't agree with your ideas. So stop caring if they agree with your ideas.
Next graph, cumulative gun deaths. You're more likely to be shot in the United States if you're a toddler or an infant than a cop. Next graph, obesity, way up. By the way, the industrial food complex wants to addict you to shitty, fatty food so they can hand you over to the industrial diabetes complex. We should not romanticize obesity. You're not finding your fucking truth, you're finding diabetes.
Boom. So impactful, right? He's giving you these little nuggets. It's like he's speaking in sound bites, and each one of them is just like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Overdose deaths, way up. Deaths of despair. When I was in high school, it was drunk driving. Now it's kids killing themselves. Young people don't want to have kids anymore. 2/3 of people aged 30 to 34 able-bodied.
See, again, none of us are reading this. You're looking at the 60% in the circle. You might have looked at 1993, right? So, Professor Galloway, Mr. Scott, it would have been so cool if you just had this circle with 60% and then you said the rest. Mind you, you might be reading this because it is a lot of like, all the little details are hard to read. Put that in your notes.
It's been cut in half. It's now less than a third, 27%. As a result,
you can hear the silent gaps when he's comparing numbers against other numbers, right?
People over the age of 60 in the US, pretty happy. People under the age of 30, not so much. Some of the lowest in the free world. What can we do? Nothing wrong with America.
See, I didn't understand that visual at all, but the way he said it made it work nice.
America that can't be fixed with what's right with it. We got the hard stuff figured out. There are programs to address all of these issues that cost a lot of money. That's the hard part. And we have figured this out. In just 5 minutes post an earnings call, we can add $250 billion to the economy.
Now, that's a great talking point that I would have loved if you would have paused afterward, because listen to that. That's such a challenging statement that if you would have paused, everyone in the world, everyone listening, not in the world, would have thought about it, agreed or disagreed, but they would have been listening even more.
Have figured this out. In just 5 minutes post an earnings call, we can add $250 billion to the economy. We've
Stop there for a second. And that would be a great place for a pause.
got the hard part figured out, the resources. We have.
See, I don't understand this slide at all. No one does, which is why I'm saying you don't need them.
Have the money, but we decide not to do it. This is per capita spending on childcare in the United States relative to other nations.
Now, that by itself, you're like, woo, look at Norway. Wow, amazing. But watch the power of comparing it to another number.
This is housing permits. Things are doable. We increase minimum wage to $25 an hour. It goes into the economy. When did we decide that the money that capital earns is more noble than the money that sweat earns? Shouldn't it be flipped?
Again, another amazing talking point, a little billboard, and he got an applause after it. Are you seeing the power of the billboard, of the little walkaway statements, the summary statements yet, everybody?
We'd rather be born gay or non-white in the United States today than poor, and that's a sign of our progress and our need to recalibrate who we give advantage to. Affirmative action, of which I'm a beneficiary of, I got Pell Grants, I got unfair advantage. Affirmative action is a wonderful thing, and it should be based on color. It should be based on green, how much money you have or don't have.
Now, very controversial, but notice, again, he's making his ideas very simple because he just bombarded us with a huge list. Boom, boom, boom. And he's not stopping. But these little asides, little moments of like personal anecdote, little moment of example, right, makes us understand what he's saying, makes that point more impactful. So when he says it should be based not on the color of your on black or white, but on green, what a great little billboard, right? To say that, summarize everything he's saying, that it's all about your poverty, your income level. That's what we should be thinking about. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, by the way. I'm just saying that's what he's saying, and he's doing it very well.
Ban phones in schools, invest in third places, big brothers and sisters programs. We need national service.
I know you're working within a time constraint, but throwing this huge list of we need to do this, with, it gets overwhelming. And so this was, I thought, like a weak point in the presentation. There's so many things, but you didn't talk about all of those things. So I would have said, like, all these little summaries, Professor Galloway, I would have actually just limited them to the things you reference and do callbacks to all the things you've already talked about.
And Canada, that they live in the greatest countries in the world, and we need to remind them of that every day by exposing them to other great Americans where they feel connected tissue. We can do all of this. We can do all of it. We have the resources. The question is, do we have the will? This is my last slide. It is an emotionally manipulative slide to try and get you to like.
So this little strategy, he actually has done it a couple of times, and I know I interrupted. I'll play it back again. But he tells you his thought process. I'm showing you this slide in the hopes that you will like me more. We can do that. I'm showing you this graph so you think I will be very smart, but really all it says is blank. Telling them your thought process is a great charismatic little tool that we can use. You know, I'm going to show you this quote so that you know that I've really had an emotional connection with this subject matter, but really it's just to make sure that you think I've done my research. I'm just kidding. But anyway, please take a moment and read that quote. That's it. You know, telling the thought process is charisma. Makes you also look very confident. The reveal also builds trust because you're being real.
An emotionally manipulative slide to try and get you to like me more.
See?
But it does have a message. This is the whole shooting match. Anybody here without kids, ask someone with kids. You have your world of work, you have your world of friends, you have your world of kids. Something happens here, your whole world shrinks to this.
I'm not going to say anything here, but you can see how personally vested he is in the topic. We can't all be personally vested in the topic, right? But moments of emotion, and I'm not saying crying emotion. Too many people think that good public speaking means like crying or this, but any kind of emotion. whether it's rage, curiosity, joy, intense interest. I know I'm not sure if that's an emotion. Excitement. Any one of those little emotional moments will invigorate the crowd.
So I present, as I wrap here, with just a few questions. One, if you acknowledge that our kids are the most important thing.
Jumping in here for a quick second, okay? What a great little strategy. And this is something I've talked about. Instead of asking one question, and you can do this at the beginning, middle, or end. He's doing it at the end. But taking several questions and stacking them is a great way to communicate power, making ideas powerful, showing your confidence, and making your whole audience think.
If you acknowledge that they're doing more poorly than previous generations, if you believe there's a chance that the illusion of complexity has done nothing but provide cloud cover for the unbelievable transfer of goodwill, of well-being, and of prosperity from young to old, and if you believe we can actually fix these problems and we have the resources, then I present to you, I posit, I augur the question that I hope has more veracity than it did 17 minutes and 24 seconds ago. And that's the following question.
Boom! My God, did you see what he did? Full circle, making a reference to your beginning at the end, starting off with a question and then ending it with the question. So powerful. Listen, look, I'm going to rewind it just a little bit. Listen to like the audience when he does this.
17 minutes and 24 seconds ago. And that's the following question. Do we love our children? My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time.
Did you hear that? That dead freaking silence? That call back to the beginning? And the whole place is like, damn, son. You got a standing ovation, by the way. A well-deserved standing ovation. So my friends, dear viewer, have you made it this far? I hope you're watching this while you're cleaning, because then you actually did make it this far. So many things we can take away from the things Scott Galloway did. But let's summarize. Number one, full circles. Start off with something and refer to it at the end. Start with a question, end with the same question. Number two, summarize each slide or each idea with a billboard, a short little phrase that really has an impact and puts the idea in the person's head. Number three, compare numbers with other numbers. A number by itself means nothing until you compare it to another number, and then it has impact, because then it creates an emotional connection. Number four, throw in anecdotes and examples, especially when you're talking about very technical information or very formal information or lots of stats. Throw a curveball and say, by the way, this person, be very specific, I throw in anecdotes and examples to make factual information, to make statistics and graphs personal. Number five, periodically throw in information without context, like all those graphs pointed up to the right, like the occasional picture, even like his opening. Slides without context build curiosity. And that's it, my friends. Almost a perfect speech. So many good things that we can copy and use in our next presentation. And remember something. You see all the things in this presentation that worked, and you think to yourself, I should do that. And then you don't. Because it's scary. Why take the chance? I know I've been in a few situations where I wanted to take the chance and do something a little different. Not crazy, just a little different. And I didn't. And it haunts me, because now I do crazy. I don't even bother with different. I just go straight up crazy. And every single time I do it, I never regret it. But the moral of the story is I never regret it. So, dear viewer, if you are still watching, I have a challenge for you. Which one of these strategies will you use? Doesn't have to be all of them. But if you pick just one thing that he did that you can try, the easiest, smallest thing that you can put into your next presentation, then I guarantee that your presentation, it might not be the best I've ever seen, but it'll be better than it would have been. And the more you do it, the better it'll get. And maybe one day I'm going to watch you and say, that was the best presentation ever. And how awesome would that be? So with that, dear viewer, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.